accessible is energy to the people of Africa? How affordable is this energy to the people of Africa? And how sustainable could this energy system be for us in Africa? We all know that energy access is a basic right required for a dignified life, which every African deserves. The UN Sustainable Development Goal 7 says that we have to ensure access to affordable, reliable, and modern energy for all by 2030. But the big question is, in Africa, are we any close to that target? 2030 is how many years from now? 7 years. Basically 6 years, because minus 2023 is already gone. So we have 6 years. Are we going to say Africa has access, has affordable energy, and sustainable energy? So these are the things that we are going to be looking at this morning. What are the challenges? What are the barriers? What are the solutions that we have that we are going to use to help us get to that place where energy is available, affordable, and sustainable for the whole of Africa? So with me this morning, we have Janet Bilingo. Please pardon if I murder the names. Please bear with me. And we have Janet is from Cannes International. We have Solomon Yamoa, who's our host here in this space. We have Florence Gichoy. Please, Florence, help me. Let me know what that is. Gichoya. Thank you very much. Forgive me. And we have Amos. I won't dare try to pronounce Amos' surname, so I don't murder it. Could you help me, Amos? Wemanya. Thank you. And Lauren Nell, which is straight to the point. So to start the conversation this morning, I'd just like us to go on the round. Everybody's just going to do 2 minutes or a minute. When you talk about energy access, what does it mean to you? Or what do you understand by that word, energy access? Solo, I think I'll start from you. Energy access.
Good morning, everyone. Well, when I'm in a room like this, it is like sometimes, honestly, like we are preaching to the converted. The reason why I'll say that is because all of us in this room, one, know the challenges, know the problems, and know what is happening. So what is energy access in my little opinion? Just like how you mentioned, looking at affordability, accessibility, energy access, according to the SDG 7, is to make sure that everyone in every country, especially developing countries, are able to access energy for their daily livelihoods. That is heating, eating, and economic. That is they going to their various places, clean and also accessible. So I'll just keep it in a very simple 30 seconds, what do you call it, summary, so that my other colleagues will also take it up from there.
Can you hand over to Florence? Florence, can we hear your opinion on that too?
Yes, good morning, everyone. My name is Florence Gishoya from the Alliance of Civil Society Organizations for Clean Energy Access. So we have that name, access, in our name, and that's why I went to the whole acronym. So access to me means that it is efficient, it is accessible, and it is affordable to everyone. If you look back some years ago, we used to have something called the Millennium Development Goals, the MDGs. And one of the things that MDGs didn't have, I think there were about 15. There was nothing like energy there. But I think what the experts sat down and realized is that you can't achieve anything in any sector without energy. So energy access means life. It means everything. It means health, transport, where we are. You can't do anything without energy. That is what access is all about. Yeah, it's like breathing. Yeah.
Thank you. So Amos, I'm going to diversify a little bit now, because we're looking at energy. What form of energy is currently available to us in Africa? Is that energy that is available to us now that we are currently using? Is that energy accessible? Is it affordable? Is it sustainable? And would it lead us to the future where everyone has a right to a safe and clean environment?
Yeah, let me say that the energy system that is available in Africa, actually, Africa is, I think, the only continent that has a variety of energy sources. But the system that we are currently in is a system that's promoted by foreign governments and companies, and is built on foreign political interests and commercial interests of foreign companies, and is highly centralized, and that means it has put power in the hands of a few, and also highly commodified, and that means it's not affordable, and this has left many of our people without having access to it, even though it's available but not accessible. Not accessible because it's not affordable, not accessible because it's extractive in nature, it's extracted from us and taken elsewhere, it serves the interests of others, it's not serving African interests. And that's why when the rains fail, we cannot use our energy to be able to continue producing. And that's why we still have our people cooking using dirty energy fuels that are causing challenges, health challenges. And this is an energy system that has brought us, all of us here, a climate and humanitarian crisis, and it needs to shift. And I'm happy that we are having this conversation.
Thank you very much. That's a very good foundation to set, because, like you said, we are all here because of the current energy system. And now we're looking at, if you go around the space, everywhere from the green to the blue to the white and all the zones, you just hear people talking about just energy transition, just energy transition, just energy transition. So let's look at that just part, that part that talks about just. What does it mean for us to have a just energy transition? Lauren, you can have a second. Thank you. Is it on? Thank you.
Is it on? No. Hi, everyone. I'm Lauren Nell from Natural Justice. I mean, that's a really loaded question. So if we're here for the next 2 hours, I'll just cover the basics about what a just means and a just energy transition. But at a very high level, yesterday we held a mini event, and this is our exact discussion about what just means and a just energy transition. And what we looked at was case studies from Kenya, South Africa. We also looked at case studies from Senegal in the form of the Just Energy Transition Partnership. And I think when you ask the question about what just is, it's about system changes, it's about bigger pitch idea, it's about not having the extractive models that we've seen with fossil fuel energy and the fossil fuel energy systems at present. And it's about overcoming that to allow for indigenous people and communities from the lens of natural justice to be able to, one, access energy, but two, see upliftment, three, empowerment, and four, be able to have access to clean, renewable energy that is accessible. I'm not entirely sure about the affordable part. That's debatable for me, because I think electricity and energy access is a basic human right, because it obviously allows you to open up doors to other basic human rights like education, water, health. And without that energy access, you're not able to achieve those. So I think that's what the just part is about. It's about allowing also for communities and indigenous people to not be left behind when it comes to jobs, to the new spaces that green energy creates. And we did a compendium on this because sadly with green energy, even though we're seeing the carbon emissions are now obviously lowered, we're not seeing the systems changing, which is the extractive capitalist model that does not uplift communities, that does not uplift indigenous people, where we also see land grabs, where we see problems regarding cultural and social rights being infringed on and violated, where we see environmental impact assessments not being done correctly. That's what the element of just should speak to. And right now we're basically seeing an energy transition, not a just energy transition transpire.
Thank you. Now, that was really, really, really on point, because you've tried to touch all the important justice perspective of this transition. Like you said, there's a transition happening, but not a just transition. So, Janet, just to come to you, what do you think would then be if we are to truly have this just transition happen for Africa? What should our priorities be with respect to energy?
I'll give, first of all, a very top line view of this, and then if there's time, we get into the nitty gritty. But basically, and just tying into where Lauren has left us off, the transition needs to be people centered. So for Africans, by Africans, with Africans. And the opportunity we have here, even at COP28, is a unique one. We are here to transition. Everybody, all the delegates are here to, to see how to have a just transition. But for Africans, we are here also to redefine our energy future. So what we need, back to your question, what we need for a just transition to cleaner energy futures is, I think my colleagues have mentioned in one way or another, I'll try and also contextualize that, is one, we need green energy, we need renewable energy. And I say this because the energies that we have were not by us or for us, really. They don't even work for us. They are colonial structures, and in current day, they do not serve us. They do not drive our interests. They drive other interests, external interests. We need reliable energy in Africa for so many reasons, because for us, one of the key factors for us is development. We do not just want energy to access. We also want meaningful energy access, of course, but we also want to develop, and we have that right to develop. It's actually a right. We need it to be affordable, as Lauren had mentioned, and affordability for us is, not just a section of the population being able to afford, but really we need to also be able to quantify what would we view or term as an affordable energy. What is the baseline? That is something that's really important for us to figure out as Africans. Again, we need safe energy. So not just any energy source, we need safe energy. Because of course energy intertwines with very many other sectors. We have also some other unique realities as a region. And so, and we can also learn from some of the mistakes made in other regions. So we really do not need to repeat those mistakes. So we do need safe energy. And then my colleagues have also mentioned that it needs to be sustainable, because we are not looking for just a near-term solution. We're looking at the long haul. And as I said when I was beginning, that we are looking to redefine our futures. The same way we've seen other regions redefine themselves, and including the region we're currently sitting in. This is a chance for Africa, and energy is quite a key pillar for us to redefine ourselves. So I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Thank you. I like what you have tried to do to highlight priorities for us in Africa. And I think it resonates with what everybody here has said. Reliable energy, energy required for the kind of development that would benefit the African people, a development determined by what the Africans decide to call development for themselves. Like someone asked a colleague a few days ago, you are from Nigeria, yes, he said, but can you see how they've used the oil money to build Dubai? What would you say to that? That was a big question, but in itself, it also posed a new question. Can you see how they are struggling to make this place green? Have you noticed that? In the midst of all of this, they are struggling real hard to make it green. But in Africa, we don't have to struggle. We are green, naturally. But so what kind of development do we want? Do we want to be like this? They will now start struggling to go back to green. So what kind of development should we be talking about? I think that's very important in this energy access discussion. And the other one you talked about is the affordability part. Who defines what's affordable? And how do we define what affordability is? And like Lauren said, affordability is energy generally is a human right. It's a basic right that every African deserves to have. And we need to take it from those perspectives. Thank you, Janet, for those priorities. So this will set us now into our discourse for today. We are looking at transiting from this current form of energy system into renewable energy system. But like we say in Nigeria, the military, they pull khaki, they come wear agbada. They pulled off the military uniform and put on the civilian uniform. And we are seeing that same method being operational in the transition today. So now we know if we continue on this pathway, we are going to end up with more environmental and more climate change impacts for us in Africa. So now, Amos, I will come to you. With respect to system change, with respect to transitioning from this dirty fossil fuel to clean renewable, what kind of a system do we need to build to ensure that we don't continue on this same pathway that we are on to destroy our environment and make our place uninhabitable? What do you think we need to build up in Africa? That's what system do we need to bring up?
Yeah, currently there are two sad realities that are taking place. But I'll begin by saying that the fossil industry, the industry that has failed Africa, has come to the realization that they cannot continue doing what they have been doing. And that's why, my brother, when you say this place has built or was built on fossil industry, but now if you walk around, you're seeing the greenness, the solars being developed, is the fossil industry has realized that soon or later they will have to phase out. But there's a sad reality that oftentimes, all the time, Africa has always been left behind in so many things. We are normally latecomers. Now we are latecomers in the gas industry, and we want to jump onto the current short-term demand for our gas by European countries to hook ourselves on an energy system that we know that has not benefited the continent. The sad reality is that Africa is lagging behind now in the transition. Of the resources that globally have gone into renewable energy development, in the last 10 years, Africa has received the least, only 2%. And another sad reality and more disturbing is that the current cost of capital for renewable energy projects in Africa is very high, sometimes 6 times higher than what others are getting at. So we need to shift these realities and make Africa become a superpower that it should be in terms of renewable, because we hold the best renewable resources. They say 60% of the world's best solar is on our continent. We need to shift this and invest in these resources to benefit our people. We've been known to supply raw materials all through history. We supply crude oil and import refined oil. Are we going to do that in the transition? We are told that we have the necessary minerals for the transition to develop the equipment. What industrial policies are we putting in place to be able to turn this around and become suppliers of the equipment to others and produce our own energy so that we are able to empower people? We are sleeping on the potential. We slept in the fossil era. We should not be sleeping in the renewable era. I think it's time Africa came together and realized that they have lost from the previous regime. And it's time for Africa to come together and develop policies and plans that will make Africa a giant that it is. So as we come here and call for the phase out of fossil fuels, for the support of development of our renewables, we need also to have local policies within our countries and regional cooperation that will allow us to be able to tap on our potential. But otherwise, we are also going to be talking 30, 40 years from now that we are again late in the renewable era. That should not happen.
Thank you very much. And I like the passion at which or by which you express this. But some things are coming up from our conversation. Africa is not taking our place. Africa is not taking our position. And if you hear our leaders that are here, for example, my own leader that came here and said, we will buy carbon, we will sell carbon. He made that openly here at COP28. How? Because he's already in a system that believes in that capitalist model of put a price, buy, and sell. He said it publicly here. We will buy carbon, we will sell carbon. Yesterday, I think it was in the Kenyan pavilion, another government official also raised it up that why are we against carbon market? And also, it just shows that capitalist ideology. So now I'll come to Florence. Looking straight at one of the aspects of this energy circle, the area of cooking, cooling, and heating. Like he said, we need a system change in this idea. How do we frame this? How do we go about changing the mindset first? Because this whole thing starts from the mind, how we have perceived ourselves, how we have perceived our situation, how we have perceived the transition that we're talking about. So in your own understanding or your own perspective, when you talk about that aspect of clean cooking for heating, clean cooking, clean energy available for heating, for cooking, and for cooling, what do you think we need to set in place to ensure that the transition that happens in that area is just and is people-centered?
So my take on that is that we have not clearly defined what transition pathways that we want to take. So we put everything in a basket. One, we are not a homogeneous, whether it's 50-something countries in Africa, and even within the countries, the different communities, they are very different needs and different aspects to when it comes to that transition, when it comes to clean cooking, heating, and cooling. So one, we need a needs-based approach. And when I talk about needs-based, it's the needs of the user and users. Many times it's all about the big announcements from the government or regional governments, but we are not looking what are the actual needs of those communities. When we talk about clean cooking, are we just saying, oh, stop using the charcoal and start using electricity? What are the transition pathways that we can come up with that can be beneficial to all these communities? So if someone is using maybe firewood, can we transition them to improved cook stoves? If there are those ones that are still using gas and they are able to afford, can we transition them to electric cooking? Yeah, so it's not a one size fits all. So we need to come up with those diverse transition pathways. We also need to direct financing again to cascade it to the end users. And I know sometimes even as CSOs, we don't get along sometimes with when it comes to private sector because they're driven by profits. But we also need to come up with a way of how we can facilitate them, maybe give them tax breaks. The ones specifically developing some of these clean cooking technologies or solutions, whether it's for heating and cooling. The government can give tax breaks for such because if then the cost is quite high, that cost is going to the person who is able to buy. And again, we go back to the issue of access. If it's not affordable, I'm not going to buy it. So it's a multifaceted approach when it comes to that transition for clean cooking. We are way, way, way behind when it comes to the targets. It's not just energy access. When it comes to clean cooking globally, especially in the global south, I don't see how we are going to be able to meet the targets by 2030. And also because we put it as a separate topic. It's only mentioned when maybe we are talking about indoor air pollution, about health issues, maybe the number of deaths, about 23,000 deaths per year. But we are not bringing it to the main conversation. We all come from countries where every year the ministers of finance read a budget. How much of that budget goes to clean cooking? How much of that budget goes to specific issues when it comes to energy transition? We are not questioning that. It's always as a by the way, and that is where we are right now. If we don't plan, then we are planning to fail as Africa. The other thing we need to incorporate is also planning when it comes to energy planning. So we do have national levels energy planning processes, but we also do have regional frameworks when it comes to driving energy access. So then there's need for more collaboration when it comes to developing some of those frameworks. and also review critically and see how we can tap into the different energy mix. So for instance, like I come from Kenya. If Uganda, they are mainly on hydro. Kenya, maybe there's a bit of geothermal as an energy source, geothermal and a bit of hydro. Then how can we complement each other when we are coming up with the East Africa power pool or different frameworks so that we're able to one, facilitate in increasing access, as well as ensuring that this transition is efficient and it's also sustainable. Yeah, so that we are not on a good trajectory, then we reach a point where, oh, we don't have financing for this, or there's no one to take it up to the end. Yeah.
Thank you, Florence. You've given us some other points that we've taken note of, but I want to pick up on one of the areas so that our panelists can also look at that situation. Talking about direct financing. Um, a report from Deloitte says that increasing Africa's capacity to achieve universal energy to access to energy by 2030 would require likely at least 25 billion US dollars per year, specifically for distributing this energy source, generation, and off-grid solution and the likes. So now looking at financing, Lauren, I know you've walked around this package of mechanism that was introduced in Glasgow, the Just Energy Transition Partnership. I think it was talking about how different developed countries can support developing countries to develop partnership to ensure that there's finance available for this transition. I know you've worked and you've had several case studies with several communities. Can you shed some light on this mechanism that was introduced in Glasgow, and let's see how that can benefit us or will do us harm in Africa?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think from a financing perspective, what I can speak to is from my experience in South Africa, which is the South Africa, it's a Just Energy Transition Investment Plan. And in terms of that investment plan, how we're seeing the funds being distributed or the financing, which at the moment stands at it's 8.5 billion was first pledged in terms of the South African Just Energy Transition Partnership. I think that's where maybe the concern comes in, and I think it speaks to Florence's points about how we look at energy pathways and what our pathways are. In regards to our plan, there is a huge focus on green hydrogen and electric vehicles and production of electric vehicles in South Africa. And when it comes to communities, there's an extremely small portion that speaks to energy access being provided. And even through the green hydrogen projects that we're seeing come up, which we've recorded violations in regards to issues like land, issues of disturbance of social and cultural rights, we've seen that it's not beneficial for energy access. It's not beneficial for even the energy within South Africa. So South Africa at present, we have load shedding. And load shedding is basically a time system where they turn off our power for about 4 to 8 hours a day because we do not have enough grid, we do not have enough generation capacity to allow for the electricity to stay on 24 hours a day. And this is across the country. So it seems like we're financing, in South Africa's instance of Just Energy Transition Partnerships, I'm worried that the money's been placed in the wrong places, onto the wrong systems, like green hydrogen, which won't alleviate the problem of load shedding at present in South Africa. And I think this speaks to how we need to look at further Just Energy Transition Partnerships moving forward, especially in regards to Senegal, which is having a similar process take place with financing that's being granted. However, there is, I would say, rumors flying around about gas being involved in their mix. So I think this is about energy choices and not so much about finance, because you can have as much financing as you would want or require. However, if you're not going to make good energy decisions, it's not going to assist in an energy or just energy transition. Just for further illustration, in South Africa, we made comments on this as they're updating our nuclear regulations, as that's now been seen as another option to bring about energy access, and it's been argued this may alleviate load shedding in South Africa. However, when we look at the economic models alone, nuclear energy is subsidized across the world in many different regions. It's extremely expensive because of the waste removal, because of the way you need to process the waste from a nuclear power plant. So again, I think I raised the point is that I think we need more access to the information as well as public participation, including communities, indigenous people, vulnerable people, to be able to discuss what kind of energy pathways will, one, be the best for the environment, but two, be the best even economically for the countries that we have. And as I think someone said, I think it was Amos, about Africa could be a powerhouse because of the energy from solar and wind that we could harness. But it seems like we're avoiding to use those two issues in meaningful ways to build that powerhouse. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Very important point. I'll start from the last point you talked about solo. I'll come to you before I come to Janet. Africa being the powerhouse. That in itself is the basis for which our governments go around with their caps in their hand, looking for money across all the pavilions and the different sessions, because they are going there to say, we have this, come by. We have this, come by. So how do we balance this? Being the powerhouse that exports, or being the powerhouse that produces energy to meet the needs of the people, then whatever it's left can be exchanged for what we have. How do we define this powerhouse discussion, Solomon?
This also brings me to a simple two anecdotes before I answer. If you realize many wars which has happened most of the continents, especially in the Gulf regions, it affects our currencies, especially Africans, because of dollarization and oil and gas, right? So if you check, if they exploit oil and gas and there are wars and OPEC prices start shooting up, it affects our basic needs of survival. The second thing is that I always use fossil fuel supplements, and our junior brothers, Nigeria, is example, whereby Nigeria, since 2015, are using 25 billion USD for fossil fuel supplements, like generators, all those supplements you can think about. So if you think about 25 billion from 2015 to 2030, can you do the math for me? That is, for even if it's 10 years, it is what? 250 billion USD. Every powerhouse having such monies to divert, or what do we call it? Look into renewable energy in their own homegrown policies can really cause the drive that we need. I always think, how long can we still be going to other developed countries, or suppose bigger countries, with our cap in hand, as you are saying, to go for possibly, they'll give you one and they'll take 10 from you, right? That's the first one. The second one is, just imagine if we are able to, Ghana has about what fossil fuel investments, those supplements about almost 10 million, about 100 million USD. Similarly, so I always sit down. We are having this renewable energy master plans. We are having an act which gives businesses the opportunities to even invest. If all these funds we are giving out to, because we don't manufacture all these things in our countries, do we? We always go out there, we don't have the technology. So if we can leverage the resources that we have to these others who have the technology to bring it on board, then that powerhouse dream can be achieved. But for these dreams too to be achieved, we talk about UAE, oil and gas, look at their trend too. When they started, it was the West who was taking over, giving them directions and everything. What they did, secondly, was to take their kids out there to learn the technology, and within some years later, they came over to take over their country. And they what? Determined the narrative. Are we putting some things into education? Investing in our young people to go out there, learn homegrown policies, as well as learn new emerging technologies to be able to help our nations, or our leadership are also looking elsewhere, whereby they will always depend on outside knowledge to be able to develop their countries. And if we are looking at this in this perspective, for us to be able to overtake, there is the need for education. We have to invest in the young people in our various countries. And we as CSOs, what can we also do? What we can do is learning and sharing what we have with our fellow colleagues, learn from the best practices from other countries. Some people, I remember when Ghana discovered oil, some of our leaders were saying, we are not going to be the Nigerian example, but we are going to learn from the Norwegian example. And I asked myself, have we learned from the Norwegian example, or we are learning from our junior brothers and their bad ways? I'm sorry, but Wale is my brother. But it is a thought-provoking questions we should ask ourselves. Are we putting the young people at the right place, at the right time, to learn to come and change the narrative of our continent? How long can we keep begging? With great minds here, I've interacted with Lorraine, Janet, and you. We have amazing brains which can really change our continent in terms of, and with Amos, for instance, with all what he is saying, and the expenses which is going to fossil fuels. Can we reach out to our political leaders, our leadership, for us to have at least a sit back? Just like how you say, we don't struggle to go green. These investments which are going to fossil fuels, I will digress a little bit again. Yesterday,
I will soon halt you. So,
okay,
yeah.
yesterday we were at the Ugandan pavilion. And we had ministers who were talking that oil and gas is the development they are looking for. And I was like, bro, you don't know what time it is. The reason being that we know that by 2035, the fossil fuel industry of energy is going to peak. And we'll be left with stranded assets. So if we really, really want to develop, as we wish to do, and we don't go begging, it's about time, one, we invested in our youth, we invested in research and development. We as CSOs should start biting very hard. We should speak truth to power. And also, lastly, young people must also take over the mantle and step up on the plate and try to make a difference. That's what I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Solo. And you always look for trouble to call Nigeria a younger brother. You'll be injured. So, but right now, there's another issue in this journey to transition. Janet, I'm going to come to you, which talks about energy efficiency. If you check, many of the stuff that we use or that the energy we require goes to is for appliances and for lighting. And if you look at those areas critically, the way we manage our energy system, the efficiency we exhibit or we put into those areas is something that is of great interest to me. There's somewhere I saw this morning, trying to prepare for this, where it talks about the kind of energy that is available. See, appliances and lighting are primary consumers of electricity in our residents and commercial buildings. For example, in our quest to transit to renewable energy, if a house has a 40-watt solar panel that can power a 25-watt incandescent bulb for almost 5 hours a day, imagine if that incandescent bulb is changed to a 5-watt bulb. how many more bulbs can you have in that apartment for that same period of 5 hours to power the room or the house where you are. So energy efficiency is all, like when sister talked about clean cooking. What are the particular needs of the people? What size of family are those people? What kind of cooking do they do in their house? What kind of heating do they require in their house? And what form of energy can be channeled to them? So talking about energy efficiency, what do you think Africa needs to be looking at in this process of transiting from dirty fossil fuel to clean renewables? How should our energy efficiency be looked at or looked upon?
Yeah, this is a very interesting area. We have had a lot of talk around energy efficiency. Even just here at COP, there's the tripling of renewables and doubling of energy efficiency pledge that countries are signing up to, including African countries. And the truth also is that the demand also in Africa has not been as high, truthfully, as other parts of the world. But that does not negate us from not planning. I think that one of the key things that's coming out of this conversation is we need to plan. We need to think ahead. We need to be playing the long game. And the other thing is we are also looking to redefine ourselves. We've said that. We're redefining our energy future. We are shifting the way we approach energy and the way we look at development and how energy can be a driver for development. So that would include, in as much as we're talking about, now shifting to greener energies, all the reliability, affordability, all those nice words that we've used, we need to also be looking at, being more efficient in the way that we use that energy. And actually, that is a very key enabler of energy security, which is a concern across the board for every other country, even beyond Africa. So I said it's unique and it's interesting because we are at a place where, we're having an energy access conversation. We have a very huge population without access, and we're trying to introduce conversations around efficiency to people who do not have access at all. But yeah, this is something that we really need to plan around, and the rest of the world is already planning around. As you can see, there's a pledge going on even right now as we speak. And so as one of my colleagues said earlier, we should not be left behind. We should be thinking ahead. The rest of the world is thinking around things like even incorporating, they call it the Internet of Things. I think you see a lot of appliances nowadays. You can even set them up like your washing machine, if you're fortunate enough to have one, and so many other appliances. You can actually time it and even use it when demand is lowest, right? So that you don't use it at peak hours. Those are all conversations that we need to be having. And what is the cornerstone of all of this? It comes down to one, such conversations we're having, goodwill from duty bearers, policy. We need this in our policy. We need financing around this. Florence had challenged us rather, on all our budgets from the different countries we're from. Do we see all of these things that we are talking about reflected there? It needs to cut across. Energy efficiency, I think, is almost like clean cooking in that it's usually an afterthought. Later, afterwards, even in the whole tripling and doubling conversation, there was so much focus on the tripling of renewable energy as if you can triple alone without energy efficiency. So that's the other thing. It goes hand in hand. You will not succeed by just shifting to green energies if you do not enable those green energies. So we need to really shift the way we think, the way we approach energy, and the way we design our energy systems. It's not about just using that extractivist model that I think it was Amos who mentioned. We need to change the way we approach energy. It's not just about using and powering everything in the house, everything is on at the same time. We have to have that mindfulness. And in that way, actually, it's a very just and even equitable, I would say, use of that energy across the board. So we need to have that at the back of our minds. CSOs have been challenged as well to really participate. So this is another area we really need to keep drumming in and ensuring that it's coming out of decisions even here at COP.
Thank you very much. So what we see here is planning, and planning. If we don't think about these things, even when we transit, we are still going to have energy crisis. But when we think about the whole stuff, and if you look at the way our parents, our forefathers, our grandparents used to manage the energies that they have, they also had energy efficiency in their agenda, even if it wasn't called energy efficiency. For example, they use firewood, they store the charcoal for use for something else. They dry stuff, and all so they had all of. Can we also study their model of efficiency and translate that into the next plan that we have? So I'm going to turn it over to the other panel on this side. I know there are people in the room who have contributions to make, questions to ask as it relates to the topic we are discussing this morning. Energy access for Africa priorities, renewable energy, and energy efficiency. The space is open for us on this side of the panel. Anybody? Yes, one hand, two, three, okay, four. So I start from you. Let's hit it to the point. Where's the mic?
So thank you very much. I think this was a great discussion, and I think you've highlighted some extremely good, powerful points regarding the energy and the concern and access. And it was very vibrant. There are a few things which I'm from Kenya, by the way. My name is Amin Khan. I'm an electrical engineer, and I'm also with the Kenya Climate Change Working Group. But there's one thing which I've noticed, which we need to find solutions. And I think some of the solutions are the ones which are going to help us in the future. Like we were told 10 years ago to go into renewable energy. And our former president told us that when we have renewable energy, our electricity costs will come down by 35–40%. However, when we got the renewable energy to be put on the grid, they're not getting the opportunity. And the PPP agreements which have been signed are signed that whether you put on the grid or not, you still get paid. Now, can you see the problem that we're having? We're having actually a leadership issue with those who signed the PPP agreements. And I think one of the things we need to do, especially in Kenya, I don't know about Ghana and other countries, is to review the PPP agreements as quickly as possible. Secondly, I think recently when I was, in fact yesterday, with the guys of Google, and they were talking about the artificial intelligence, I realized that one of the issues we face in developing countries is that the grids are not smart. So one of the things that we are being told all the time is that we have to use diesel because it is quicker and it comes up, very easily. And when you have manual systems, it's very difficult to be able to change. Maybe this is one of the reasons why it's been done that way. But the artificial intelligence with smart grids and are modeled properly would be another solution that we need to push for as quickly as possible. Thirdly, I agree also on nuclear. I think nuclear is the way to go. Many people don't have the proper understanding of nuclear, but a small nuclear plant can actually run a whole village and whole nation even, quite big. Did you know that just here, close by, we have, which is this other town in UAE? They've got 4 nuclear stations in Abu Dhabi. 4 nuclear power stations. How do you think the whole of UAE and everybody is running? And I think in Africa, we are being denied the opportunity for nuclear because we are told that it's not the right way to go. In fact, I think with the green hydrogen we're talking about, it's probably worse because you can make hydrogen bombs. But nuclear can be made in such a way, it's more expensive, but it's easier to put the waste into lead and put it into the ground properly, believe me. And it's not taking out that much carbon dioxide. And lastly, I think you're thinking about reducing the cost of using bulbs. It came up. And in Kenya, we have actually tried to push for LEDs. I don't know if you guys know LEDs, light emitting diodes. From 5 watts, you can get about 60 watts of lighting. And those are sort of things that we need to build and maybe make within our own countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. With the last one, I guess our panelists will attend to that. Please come closer. Just make it hit the nail on the head. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Nega Dorin. I am from Uganda. I do like the panelists' discussion because having just transition is no longer a necessity, but a shared responsibility where the women and youth are not left behind. My question to the panelists, I have two questions, if you can allow me ask them, like straight to
can
the
hit
point.
it.
Exactly. Recognizing that to have the conversation around just transition has to come from an Afrocentric perspective. How can we be able to start these conversations towards the realization of Agenda 2063? My second question is coming in from how can we have the conversation around energy transition, but aligning it to the country's regional needs in order to see that just transition is able to recognize their different geographic realities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So who's going to take this one? You take that one. Can you note it down? And don't forget, let's take all the questions so that we can run at it. The next one, please.
Um, Hi, everyone. My name is Vincent Egoro from Publish What to Pay Coalition. So I've got a question. And so we've seen that to achieve energy transition, governments across the world are, making some trade-offs, okay, based on their geopolitical ambition, their economic priorities, and environmental goals. These are all based on the resources available to them. In the global north, they have the infrastructure, they have the policies, the resources, and the capital, which we do lack. Now, my question then is, for us, just for your topic to say African priorities, what's the most important trade-off that African countries can do to be able to have a faster energy transition, given the condition and the situation where we find ourselves? And also, secondly, one of the biggest challenges I've seen in my country, Nigeria, is about access to capital to finance the energy transition. So we have individually, I try to power my house to get a backup solar connection. It cost me over $3,000 to be able to achieve that for a single building. That's how much expensive it is. So imagine the poorer people who cannot afford that money. How do we have that capital? What do we do to be able to get the resources, to power and renewable energy projects across Africa? Thank you.
Okay. So guys,
Yeah.
we thought our time was till 12, but we're just getting information that it's now. And that's why we've been taking our time, because we felt we had the 2 hours to ourselves. But apparently we don't. So can the room, because that's the information we got, that we had 2 hours. Can the next people just give us 10 minutes to wrap up this so that we can have a conversation? Said no? So what do we do? Just give us 5 minutes and we'll round up, because we had a misconception with the time.
Yeah, I'll have a quick response to Afrocentric approach. One of the things that we need to be careful is the divide and rule. We are always told that Africa is not a country, and that separates us. And that's where you see countries like Senegal and South Africa being cherry-picked for just energy transition programs. What about the other African countries? And when you look at those partnerships that are being structured, for example, between Senegal and IPG is the National Partners Group. How can Senegal, a small country, be negotiating a partnership with a group of countries that are so powerful? Where the power balance is? So Africa should not be divided in that sense. I know we are different in many ways, but when it comes to championing African interests, we should not allow ourselves to go as individual countries, because we get the short end of the stick. And that has been seen in several instances already. So we need to really be strong together.
Thank you for your questions. I'll first respond to the one by Amin. Just on the aspect about nuclear, when it comes to Dubai, there was a report that was released just before COP on the high number of respiratory infections because of the pollution. So in as much as you would want to give it as a good example for nuclear, there's the other aspect, especially when it comes to the getting rid of the waste. So that's a big problem. So how do we counter that balance? There's an African country I know of, Kenya, that is developing a nuclear. And with the county they have chosen is called Kilifi. So if you know Kenya for tourism, Kilifi is one of those exotic counties. And they're saying, oh, the government is saying you are going to bring about 2,000 jobs. But we already have in that county about 10,000 jobs connected to tourism. So what is the buy-in? Do we, and of course, very exotic biodiversity like the mangroves and all that. So I think when it comes to nuclear, we really have to think through about that. About Vincent's question, I'll answer on the one on access to capital finance to power renewables. The biggest financiers when it comes to clean energy are the multilateral development banks. And they've been focusing so much on the big projects, saying, oh, we are connecting these two countries. This is going to contribute this certain amount of megawatts to the national grid. But you will find communities where they have this big wind power system there, and the person living next door, they don't have access to power. So we need to see more financing going to the decentralized renewable energy systems, the mini grids, the off grids, so that we can reach to the last mile communities.